It's probably no less than once a week that I get an email or a message through our website from a man who has been betrayed asking, can you please point me to more resources for male betrayed partners? And while there have been some and some good things out there, it's definitely one of those areas where much more is needed. Well, today I get to have a conversation with Adam Nissenson. My conversation with Adam was insightful and fun, and he's clearly both knowledgeable and heartfelt in his work. And so I am so grateful that I get to put out there another resource for men who have been betrayed. I do want to say this, though, to our female listeners. There's a lot of overlap, and there are insights from this episode that will apply to you as well, as betrayal rocks, everyone in some ways that are similar, regardless of gender. Adam, welcome to Betrayal Recovery Radio.
Thanks for having me
here. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Yes, and I'm super excited to get connected with you through our friend Carol Sheets connected us, and so glad she did, because what we're talking about today, we just need so much more material and content out there on this subject. I want to just ask you, you shared in your book that you sent me a copy of, that really you're writing from both professional and personal experiences. And I wondered if you might want to talk a little bit about how you got here.
Well, I know we don't have time for the full story, but like 13 years ago, my now ex-wife had an affair, and it, like most anyone that goes through that, it flipped my world upside down. It was not only probably one of the darkest, deepest, loneliest times in my life. I realized on that journey that there was nowhere for me to really turn, not only just as a man going through betrayal, but resource-wise and stuff like that. And then I became a therapist, and it just organically, which is another long story, started to happen to where I fell into this niche. That's a huge need, if you will. So that would be the short story. Yeah.
Why do you think it is that there is such a need around this? That men, when men are the betrayed partner, we have a harder time getting them to come into our practice. They seem to be an underserved, underreported segment of our society. What do you think is going on there?
You just hit the first part. Is I think just men in general looking for self-help and therapy, right? There's that stigma maybe of being weak, or I'll figure this out on my own, right? And you see that in your practice. I see that in mine. With betrayal, I think it's amplified. It's times 10, because it really gets to the man's ego. It gets to that stigma of shame, of maybe not being enough, right? Most men, I don't know about you, but like I grew up with the idea of like I have to buck up, tough it out. Right. Yeah. Have to do it on my own. Can't ask for help, or like the old joke, guys don't ask for directions.
Right.
This is probably the directions that all men need help with. So I think that's the underlying current of why this is it's a taboo topic for men. Like you don't ever really hear of men talking about being cheated on. And I don't want to stereotype. And I've heard plenty of women talk about it in society. And I mean, if you think of all the magazines and all the books out there, all the stuff I see on Reddit, which if we want to talk about Reddit later, we can, because I think Reddit's a pretty toxic place to navigate your partner betrayal. But yeah, that's kind of what I see with men when it comes to this kind of work.
Yeah. And, I get emails and messages from men who've been betrayed asking me for resources. But another email I frequently get from them is, and I really try to be mindful of this, but so often when I'm having these conversations, we sort of use this generic he, she, with the he representing the one who betrayed and she representing the one who was betrayed. And I try to be mindful of it because I know, I can imagine, I won't say I know, but I can imagine if I'm wanting this resource, how that could just feel like more alienating.
And I just want to say, maybe as a guy, I'll just own it. It kind of ticks me off when I read all these books, and it's the guy is always the cheater.
Right.
And I know the statistics are really kind of wishy-washy. Is it like 30% of women get cheated on in a marriage, I think. And I think for men, they say like 18%, but it's underreported, right? So I got to think it's almost 30% for both for both sexes. But yeah, there's no resources out there. That was the other catalyst, right, for me to write this book is not only did I live it and experience it, but as a therapist, I help people navigate it all the time. And I really learned that men didn't have anything that spoke in their tone, in their voice. There's nothing out there written by a man who actually truly knows that pain.
Mm.
And so I'm hoping I can start to shift that paradigm and start to let men know that this is part of life. This is part of relationships. I often tell my clients when in a relationship, your heart gets cracked open 2 times. It gets cracked open when you fall in love, and it gets cracked open when the relationship or you get hurt, right? And that's part of the human experience. So yeah, no resources out there for sure.
It's tough. That's one of the reasons I was so excited to see what your work is all about. And so to kind of get a little deeper into your work, you've actually put together a model, right, called
Yeah,
masculine betrayal trauma,
yeah,
MBT.
MBT recovery.
So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about MBT recovery, masculine betrayal trauma recovery, what sets it apart, some of its unique features?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily earth shattering, not to minimize what I created, but one of the things I've learned and I've watched men go through that I work with and my own experiences, I thought it'd be good. Look, men, we like instructions. We like to see how things work. And I felt like I can get men to a place through 7 stages, my MBT recovery model, right? And in all betrayal trauma, right? I think we always start with shock, right? It's always shock, and it's always this disbelief and the questioning and the wondering. What I notice happens with men is that shock gets intertwined with their ego or their ego injury, right? And often what men, right, we're taught when something breaks, what do?
Fix it.
Fix it. Fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so the ego injury kicks in that initial stage, and a man just wants to fix it. And I'll, like in my book, one of the things I did was at the end of each chapter, I wrote my experience. So I remember that my fixing was I remember my ex-wife, the first thing I said after she disclosed or let me know what was happening, I said to her, I was like, I wonder what my part is. That was like one of the first things I said to her. And looking back at that just feels crazy to me. I was going to fix it. I was going to fix me, but I wasn't going to fix what the real problem was. So that's the first stage. And then do you want me to talk every stage here or do you?
Yeah, I
I just,
actually do. No, I really do. I mean, we can pause in between them, but so let's do that.
yeah.
Let's talk about ego injury. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that?
I think for men, the ego also incorporates a lot of walls because we don't really always let men in, right? Men struggle with vulnerability.
Right.
And so when I'm into the denial and my ego's injured, I'm putting up walls. I'm not letting people really know what's going on with me. Like we said, I'm going to fix it. Right. And so that's usually that ego injury, that wound. I like to call it kind of the ego trap. It traps us into this false belief that by doing this, I'm going to fix everything and everything's going to be okay and it's going to turn out okay. And that's just not true, guys. If you want to do this work, this is going to be probably some of the hardest work you'll ever do. And it'll also be probably the most rewarding work you ever do. And it'll change who you are as a man for sure.
Okay. So phase 2.
After my shock, right? Then I'm questioning everything and I'm wondering it's my self-worth and who am I and how did this happen to me and why am I not enough? And so it really gets into that self-worth, that self-esteem, that self-love kind of wound, which actually, to me, interestingly, in addiction work and in betrayal work, like, right, self-love, self-worth, self-esteem, those are kind of the core concepts. When you find that, you can start to heal. You can start to love yourself. So stage 2 is really questioning everything you know about yourself and doubting yourself in that process throughout that stage.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about a lot of the clients I've worked with where, and I do talk about this here on the show. Most of the couples I see, it is the woman who's been betrayed, and they do have their own sort of questions around self-worth, but it's listening to you, I can hear some subtle nuances between the way I often hear things articulated from women versus what you're saying here. And yet there's kind of this odd beauty, I think, in the fact that regardless of gender, it's both like, am I enough? Was I enough? You know, getting back to those questions of worth. What are some of the specifically male self-worth questions, you think?
I'll answer that. I'll say too, that kind of drops down to like the fourth stage, like the
Okay.
competitiveness and the jealousy, right? I think for men, it's the ego and that self-worth, all that stuff will combine. And, the things I hear from men is that it's instantly like, am I just not enough as a man? Or what did I not do enough? Or what does he have that I don't have, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the guys I work with, what I notice in the beginning of this process, it's more around exterior. Like, am I not fit enough? Did I not make enough money? I don't have big enough muscles, right? Or I don't have any hair, and this guy has a full set of hair, right?
Mm.
Sorry, no offense there.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm practicing all my grounding tools right
No,
now.
you're good. You're good.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Right. So I think what happens for the guy is he starts to find all his faults that actually aren't faults. They're just part of the many pieces that make him unique in who he is. And I think that's where that self-worth comes into play, if you will.
Stage 3 or phase 3, anger and projection, you said.
Yeah. Well, I'll stereotype here. Most men, we do anger pretty well. I see it work, right? Men either are ragers and they're in it and you really know where they're at, or they hold it in and then it
Right.
comes out sideways, right? And
Yes.
so the anger and the projection and actually, I was sharing with you, when we were having our lunch, is that, for me, my experience, I remember, I'm just going to admit some stuff here. I think it's kind of in the book, but like, man, in my mind, I was like coming up with strategies like, how do I get even with this guy that stole my wife, right? How can I hurt him? I don't mean physically, although I'm sure I had some of those
Sure.
thoughts, right?
Sure.
Full disclosure, right?
Yeah.
But like the anger consumed me, right? And I was projecting on him and I was making up stories. And what I learned in that is that anger didn't serve me. It kept me hidden. It kept me away from the work I really had to do. It allowed me to focus on the wrong thing. Actually, the anger needed to be at my ex-wife and myself and the breakdown of our relationship. I learned I wanted to be angry at myself because I missed some signs or I had a chance to grow and I didn't do it. Right. But it's lost energy for sure, I think. And as we know, under anger is pretty much always sadness,
Right.
right? Grief and
Right.
the heartache. And so it's a delay mechanism.
So then it goes down into, and you mentioned this a little bit ago, competitiveness and jealousy. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you, I have some clients that they start to hit the gym. They start to diet, right? I had one guy that he was so excited. He came in and told me he bought a membership at a tanning salon. He was going to show his wife that he was worthy and good looking, right? And right. And I think that's human nature, right? I want to see where I measure up, right? I think we're all comparing ourselves to the Joneses, as they say. And so I see a lot of men doing that. It's like, and I think men by nature were more competitive, right? And so, I will tell you, I like when through my experience, I was figuring out like, who is this guy and what does he do and what are his hobbies? And well, I do that too. And right, like it's that compare and contrast, which again keeps us stuck, doesn't help healing, right? It actually, I think it amplifies the hurt or actually it keeps the hurt hidden, which allows it to grow and cultivate a lot more.
Okay. Then next, because I've got my little cheat sheet here,
Yeah.
withdrawal and
We're all
isolation.
I'm going to say, don't we all do that sometimes when we're in pain, right? Like just, I think after that shock goes away, all that anger, all those things, I think there's a phase of being numb. And also I think there's a phase of, what do I do? Maybe for a guy, it might be admitting defeat or realizing that they're powerless. That, I think for most men, I think for me, I learned like my wake up was when I surrendered. I work with men a lot on the idea of surrender because most men think surrender means I'm a quitter. When actually I think surrender is actually, that's a man of strength. That's a man of clarity. That's a man that knows that what I'm doing isn't working and I need to ask for help. Right. And so So I think that that's the part, right? We withdraw, we isolate, kind of got to lick our wounds. I think the sadness kind of gets to really start to build, and then you start to realize I have to do something different.
An interesting dynamic that I'm thinking of right now as I'm listening to you describe this particular phase or stage. Um, Thinking back on when I have worked with male betrayed partners and um, their partners, I think a couple of them were kind of stuck in that phase of withdrawal and isolation. It's like they got there and then they sort of landed there. And so interesting, it was their wives. Some of them was like their wives bringing them in, like, come on, we've got to get help, like, and they had
Shake
almost,
him,
yeah, like,
wake him.
I want to
Yeah.
make this better. I want us to be okay, but they were just sort of still in
Yeah.
that place.
You have to be willing to admit defeat, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's part of it. I have some of my clients that come to me not for betrayal trauma. Like I have a couple guys like a year or two working with them, and they'll finally admit to me, I finally feel safe enough to tell you this happened to me. And I'm just like, wow, like how have you done that? And they
Yeah.
haven't very well, right? But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it takes a lot, I've noticed, for a man to surrender.
Yeah. Yeah.